What's up guys, and welcome back to another Revit tools video. In this video we'll be covering the create a group tool, or just working with model groups in Revit. So you can find the group tool up here in the modify tab. You could also place a group through model group here. There's place a group and create a group again, and then you can load as a group into open projects. We'll get into all this later in the video. Something that I do want to point out at the beginning of the video, that this is going to be part one of groups. It's going to be the basics. What is a group? Why do you use a group? What happens? How does it function? And then when you might want to use groups. I am not a huge advocate of groups because of how they interact with other elements in Revit. It can be kind of dicey. It's not something I always try to use. On the other hand, if you're familiar with other programs such as SketchUp, modeling, grouping, and everything is so important and vital to effectively model in SketchUp or other programs like that. Revit is different. While you can do the same thing with model groups, I don't necessarily recommend it. In this video, part one, we're covering the basics. Let's get right into it. So what I can do, I can't make a group out of nothing, so I have to start with some model elements. So for that, I'll just start with some walls. Make a couple walls here. I'll zoom in just like that. We've got some walls. What I can do at this point is I can select all the elements and I can create group. I'm then prompted to name the group, so I will just name this wall group, and I can choose to open this in the editor or not. I'll go ahead and do that, but I don't necessarily always do that. So when you're in the group editor, you have the option to add other elements or remove them if you would like to. When you do that, just notice that that will take into account everything that you have in the group once you finish, and then that will be populated across all the groups. Okay, so now I have this group. You can select it and you can see it's model group, it's called wall group, it's associated level 1 in this case, and you can see there's an origin right there. Most of the time you won't need to change that or affect that, but by default it is the center, like kind of the centroid of all the elements that you have. What I can do now is I can go to model group in the architecture tab, I can place group, and now I'll have an option of choose all the groups in my project and just place them. Right now I only have one group in this project, which is the one I just made, and now I can begin placing it wherever I want and however I want. And I have the same group in these 6 different places. Not necessarily something I might do, but as an example, the basics of modeling with groups, this is what you get. When I select one of those groups, I have the option up here to edit the group, just like we were in before. I can edit this group, but I can also choose to ungroup it. So for this one example, maybe I want to ungroup this and I want to make this completely separate from all these groups. I can hit ungroup and it just, in this case, is every wall. I have all these walls that are independent. They're not associated with these groups at all. I can freely move these and do whatever I want with them independently from all the groups. It's disassociated. It has been ungrouped. Just like before, I can, instead of placing, I can even choose to copy. So I can copy these groups around. Just like before, I can actually rotate them, do anything I want with them at this point. And now, like I said before, you can go to edit group, and maybe I want to add elements to this. Maybe I want to add some doors. I've got a door I'll place there, there, and there. And as soon as I finish, you can see that doors populate throughout all the groups I have placed. Very simple. This is a great reason why you would want to use groups. This is the whole advantage of using groups, because it's uniform throughout all the groups placed in the project. You know you're only editing it in one place. A lot of times what I do is, if I'm in 3D, for example, I've got all these groups and I know I just need to edit one. I'll probably end up just selecting one and isolating that in view with the sunglasses down here, isolating the element, and now I can easily work with this entire group very easily and make the edits that I need to in the group editor. So I can then have that populated throughout the project as soon as I click finish. Go back down and reset the temporary, and you can see all of those walls in the groups are now angled. It's kind of the basics of what groups are. Now, where you might use them, that's kind of up in the air. You could use them for anything and everything. You can use them even for an entire floor plate of walls and furniture and everything and copy them up the building. You can do that. A lot of times what I do is I'll take an entire floor, and if it's going to be copied up to multiple floors, I will make it a group, I'll copy it up, and then I will immediately ungroup it just so everything is there in place. And again, you could do that by going through the different copy and paste options. So I can Control C and then go to paste in the modify tab, and I could align to selected levels. And in this case, I could select level 2, and I can get the same model group showing up on level 2. You could do the same thing like that, and then you can ungroup that level there, and so you've got all these different things associated on level 2, but that's not part of the group. Again, there's 100 different ways you could use groups. The problem with groups that I have is that they very easily break, and it's hard to explain why or what, but a lot of times model groups break, and it's dependent on a host or joins. So let's see if I can quickly throw an example together. If I go back to level 1, I'm going to get rid of all of these groups, and I'm going to make some walls. Make some walls here, very simple like this. And what I'll do now is I'll make it to where these walls just go up to level 1. Yes, or up to level 2, of course. And from there, maybe I want to make some walls here, make a room there, another room there, and split it right there. And I'll go ahead and throw some doors in there. Door, 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 and then a door right there, why not? What I want to do maybe is make a group out of all of these interior walls. That makes sense, right? Because of course what you might want to do is use this configuration in other places. Maybe you have this same configuration of walls somewhere else. Maybe you've got it right over here, and you want to use this interior configuration of walls over there. It makes perfect sense that you would want to do this exact thing, is use groups. So I'm going to select all these elements. I will create a group. I'll name this just example. And what I can do now is place this group. So I'll go back to model group and place group, and now I've got this same group up here to choose from. I've got that first wall group that I made, and now example, and what I can do is place this really anywhere I want, but I want it constrained in these walls. And at this point, that's where the origin can come into play. So now I can change this origin to, let's say, at one of the interior corner of one of these walls. It'll make it very easy for me to now move this group in the right place. I'm going to now move based on this origin, and you can see group origin. When I highlight over it, I'll select that, and I know I'm clicking the same place, and now I've got the group right there in place. So part of the problem that groups have, I said, that they'll end up breaking, and they end up breaking when you get so many different elements in all of these groups. And just like before, adding different things to groups, it works. I can add all these windows here. I can even go in and drop in some furniture, a desk there, and as soon as I click finish, it's going to populate over there. That's awesome. That's perfect. That's why you want to use groups. But the problem is sometimes the groups break, and you'll know they have broken in a sense if you click the group and you see an icon up here that says Restore All Excluded. And that may mean that the group is broken. It may just mean that a model element has been excluded from a particular instance of a model group. So I've got this group, and what I can do is I've selected it at this point. Maybe what I want to do is not include this wall and all associated elements to the wall, all hosted elements, in this case the wall, the door and the window. Maybe I want to exclude those from this model group instance. There's a quick way to do that. So I will select the group, I will tab to that wall, and as soon as you do that, you can see there's this icon that pops up right there, and if I hover over it, I can see it says group member. So this is saying this element is a group member. Click icon to exclude in this group instance. So this whole group, this instance of the group, if I click this button, none of these elements will be included in this particular instance. So when I do that, they leave, they're gone, but you can see as I highlight, they're actually still there, and that's the thing to be aware of. I can click that, and now when I click this one, I don't see anything up here, but when I click this instance, there's a Restore All Excluded. And like I said before, this does not necessarily mean your groups are broken or anything like that, but this can quickly lead to confusion. And honestly, I cannot say that I have ever excluded a single object from a group in a particular instance, just because generally speaking, they're not, if you're going to make a group, it's going to be generally the same, and these two are generally the same, but I'm not going to disassociate one single element from a group. I'm going to work my groups out in a different way to where it's including the correct elements across all instances. And that's just me. You're welcome to use this because obviously it does work, and as soon as I hit Restore All Excluded, they are right back in this particular instance of the model group. It works. I'm not saying don't use it. Now I will say what can begin to break it is wall joins and families that are hosted to things that are in or out of the model group. So for this example, if I have this model group, there may be things that I have associated to these walls. So let's go ahead and edit the group, and I'll add a window. I'll just add a window there and there and there, and I'll put it in this group. But these walls, if you remember, are not in this group, and I can't select them, and they're not in this group. So I'll hit Finish, and now I do have these windows showing up in the walls. It works. I wouldn't necessarily do it like this because, again, you're kind of testing the limits of model groups, which I wouldn't recommend, because the second this wall moves, you're going to get this error. This is the terrible error, and it says, hey, you've essentially broken the group. And why have you broken the group? That's because you're trying to move this wall, but not the group, or not the windows, but the windows are stuck in the wall. And so it's saying group instances of the same type do not contain identical members. Press Fix Groups, and then you have a different set of options. So I'll hit select, I'll just say Fix Groups, and at this point what I can do is I can ungroup the inconsistent groups. In this case, up here, this wall didn't necessarily move, so the windows are fine where they are. Whereas in this case down here, I move the wall down here, and it would ungroup inconsistent groups. So this becomes inconsistent to the rest, and it would break the group, and it would just become ungrouped. Just like that. It's a new group in all of itself. So really, once I do that, I do have this group, and it's still called example, and this works. But if you look up here, nothing up here is grouped anymore. So what it essentially did is say, I want this to be the new group, and if this does not match that anymore, like 100%, it's not going to happen. So this, in this case, is my only instance of the group now, because this wall was not moved like this wall. I'm going to undo all of that, so we can, I'll put these windows back, redo this and that. So I've got the windows back, and I'm going to move this wall again, and I'll select Fix Groups. And now what I can do is, maybe I don't want to ungroup every group that's inconsistent to this new one. I have the option to create a new group type. So I do that, and now what I have when I select this group is the example group, and what I now have over here is example 2. It can get very painful whenever you have groups, like tons of different kinds of groups in your project that are constantly breaking, need to be fixed, and so you have different instances of different types of groups all over the place doing different things. They're going to be hard to track. That's another reason why I don't necessarily like groups. I like using them in very specific instances. Something else to be aware of is that just like in the project browser, you have all your views, legends, schedules, sheets, and families. There's also a tab for groups. Once I create groups, there's a detail and model groups, and I can see all of my different model groups here. You can drag and place them in like that, like you would any other family, or you can place them up here through the model group and place model group. Doesn't matter. You could also edit them this way. There's nothing really to edit with the groups because they're just groups. but you can rename them, do whatever you need to do in that case there. The final thing I will talk about is if I go into this group, I have the option to attach, and attach is referring to attaching a detail group. See down here I've got a detail and a model group. I can attach a detail group to this model group. That can be helpful because maybe you have this instance of this model group on a sheet and you have different sheets in different places where it shows up and they're different views. But you have a particular detail group or 2D set of elements that you want to show up with this group everywhere it shows up. So what I can do at this point is I'm going to go to annotate. I will go to component, and I've just got a couple of different, this is the base template, so I've got these different bricks. So let's choose this brick, and I'll actually use the repeating detail. I'll do repeating detail and brick, and I'm just doing this as an example to show these different bricks. These are 2D elements, they would not show up in 3D, so I've got all these bricks here. That's great. So what I want to do maybe right now is make this a detail group. I can select all of these different brick 2D elements, and just like before, I can create a group. And when I do this, I'll just call these bricks. And right now you can see because they're 2D elements and they're from the annotation tab, they're 2D, they'll only show up in this view. You know they're 2D if when you create a group, you see a detail group. That's perfect. That's what I want. So in this case, let's go ahead and edit the model group. I will attach a brick. I'm going to attach this detail group of bricks to this model group. And what is the attached detail group? What's the name of that? Well, brick 2D. How about that? I'll hit OK. And now I need to add any detail groups that I can see. And right now, the default option is add, and I'm in the attach option of the model groups. I'll hit add, and I can select that element. As soon as I do that, it grays out to tell me that it is now added to the model group. I'll hit finish, and again, I'll hit finish. And so now I'm leaving the group. And now you can see as soon as I select that detail group, it's now a part of this model group. And the reason I know that it is a part of it is because I can see that little paperclip icon right there telling me that it is attached to that group. So now that I have my detail group in my model group, I now want to place this again. And I can go to architecture, model group, and place, and I'll go to example, and I will just place this over here. And as soon as I do that, I get elements were deleted, use edited, pasted elements to keep them. Now what is that? That's referring to all of those windows. If you see the windows here, those windows are now, they're in the group, but they're not there because there's no host. It's just kind of a mess. Another thing to be aware of, make sure that every host of all these elements that you have in the group are also in the group. Huge. Definitely remember that. What I can do now is, and it's telling me to restore all. As soon as I restore all, it's saying, hey, I want to restore these windows. They're not there. Again, like I just said, they can't come back because the walls aren't there, so I'll just get rid of them. But one thing I can do when it comes to these 2D groups is whenever I select this group, I can see attached detail groups, and I can see all the different detail groups that I have in this model group. And I can choose to show this or not. Now with this instance, again, this is the same group as before. With this instance, by default, it's unchecked. But if I want to see it, I can simply check it, and now I can get my 2D model group back. It works just like that. One last thing to be aware of. I know that I put these windows in and it broke because I didn't have these walls in the model group. Definitely put the host as well as all the elements in the model group if you want any of them in there. But one big thing, if you want to be successful with model groups, this is another thing to be aware of. I'm going to copy these walls down again, and I'll just get rid of these windows, and I'll go ahead and make some walls. I'll make some walls in here that I will ultimately want to be in a model group, just like this. It doesn't matter. So I'm going to take all of these walls. I'm going to create a model group. I'll say walls join, because what I want to do now is show you how to disassociate all the walls and not allow the joins so there's not any problems with groups. So walls by default want to join. So when I hit edit group here and I drag this wall over to the end, you can see I get this nice clean join, which that's what you want as far as a look. But when it comes to model groups functioning well, that may not be what you really would like to do because of how things are worked. So let's drag this over here and you can see it does end up working, but like I said before, joining is one of the big problems that model groups have. So one way around that, and something I absolutely recommend to everyone, this is the way I use model groups, and this is about the only way I use model groups, is I'll go into these elements and I'm going to disallow the joins on all the ends of these walls. So I go to the wall joins tool, I'll select the end there, I'll disallow the join, disallow the join. Same thing with this wall, disallow and disallow. And at this point you know they're disallowed, these joins are disallowed. If I see these little T marks here at the end, that's perfect. That tells me that the joins are not allowed. If I hover over it again, I can see allow join and it just quickly toggles back, but I want to make sure the ends of these walls are disallowed. The joins are disallowed. And now what I can do is take this wall into that wall, and I'll take it to the edge right there. I'll take this one to that edge, this one to that edge. And so I'm getting the same result. I don't have this perfect clean join, but that's okay. But the result I'm getting is a perfectly clean model group with walls that are functioning just fine. And as I add different things and edit these walls slightly, if you make sure that the edges and ends of all the walls that touch elements that are not in the model group do not have their joins allowed, you're going to have much more success with model groups. I really hope this made some sense to you and was not too drawn out. I know it was quite long, but I hope you were able to learn something about model groups. If you did like this video, please demolish that like button. It really helps a lot. This was part 1 of model groups. I covered the basics in quite a long time, but still covered the basics. What I want to cover in the next video is, if you go to the architecture tab, model group, I want to cover load as a group into open projects, as well as if I click this group, there's an option to create as a link. You can convert this into a link. I'll cover that in part 2 of model groups, so I hope you stick around for that one. Please watch this video first, obviously. If you stuck around to the end, you're awesome. You're better than everyone else who didn't. Don't tell them, but don't worry, they won't know because they didn't watch up to this point. That's great. So I hope you all have a wonderful day, and thanks for watching.